It was a regular Saturday afternoon. Nothing heavy about it. We had stopped at a department store outside Columbus after picking up groceries. My wife had gone to look at something near the dressing rooms while I stood in line with a cart full of paper towels and cereal boxes. The overhead lights hummed softly. Somewhere behind me, a child kept asking for candy. I remember noticing how normal it all felt. That's when the security guard approached me. He was older, gray hair tucked under his cap. He didn't look alarmed, just tired. "Sir," he said quietly, "come with me. You need to see something yourself." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse anyone. He just held my gaze a second longer than necessary. I paid for the groceries. My wife had stepped aside to take a call. That part wasn't strange. She'd been getting more calls lately. Volunteer work, she said. School committee, things like that. I followed him down a narrow hallway that smelled faintly like fabric softener and cleaning spray. We turned a corner near the employee office. He pointed to a small monitor mounted high on the wall. A live camera feed. And there she was, pressed lightly against the corridor wall near the fitting rooms, laughing, twirling her hair while she held her phone close to her mouth. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught enough. "I told him I'm on the phone with the school," she whispered. Then she smiled, a soft, private smile. "Just one more night, then I'll tell him." I didn't say anything. I didn't feel anger first. I felt stillness. The guard looked at me carefully. "Figured you'd want to know," he said. I nodded. My hands didn't shake. I walked back to the checkout area, collected the bags, and loaded them into the trunk of our SUV. The late afternoon air felt cooler than before. When she came out minutes later, she was smiling, relaxed, almost glowing. "Sorry," she said as she got into the passenger seat. "School stuff." I leaned over and kissed her forehead. "No problem," I said. She didn't know that something had already shifted. That night, I lay beside her in bed, staring at the ceiling. The room was dark, except for the small blue light from her phone charger. She slipped her phone under her pillow before turning toward me. That was new. I listened to her breathing. Slow, even, practiced. "My name is Marcus Hale. I'm 46 years old. I spent most of my career in military intelligence before moving into project management for a construction firm. I'm not impulsive by nature. I observe first. I collect information. I make decisions last. So I didn't confront her. I started watching. Over the next few days, small things lined up in ways they hadn't before. A new gym bag that stayed zipped. Evening committee meetings that ran past 10. A different perfume in the bathroom cabinet. Her phone screen that used to sit face up on the kitchen counter now stayed dark and locked. I didn't accuse her. I didn't question her. Instead, I opened a small notebook in my desk drawer and began writing down dates and times. Not out of anger, out of clarity. And 2 days later, I made a quiet call to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Then I waited. The man I called was an old colleague named Aaron. We had worked together years ago when digital evidence started becoming part of everything. He left government work and built a private forensic consulting firm. Careful, discreet, quiet reputation. I didn't give him a speech. I gave him facts. "I need a review," I said. "Deleted messages, cloud backups, financial patterns." He paused once. "Are you sure you want to see it?" he asked. "Yes." That was all. While he worked, life at home stayed outwardly normal. The mornings were routine. Coffee brewing at 6:15, the smell of toast, our kids arguing about who left their shoes in the hallway, my wife Claire moving around the kitchen like she always had. Efficient, calm, slightly distracted, but once you start noticing inconsistencies, they don't stop. She'd leave her phone charging in the living room, then circle back quietly to retrieve it before going upstairs. She'd smile at texts and tilt the screen away without thinking. Her volunteer nights were always Tuesdays and Thursdays. But one Thursday I drove past the community center on my way home from a late meeting. The parking lot was dark. I didn't text her about it. I wrote it down. 3 days after I called Aaron, he sent a secure link. I waited until the house was quiet. The dishwasher humming. The kids asleep. Claire in the shower. I opened my laptop at the dining room table. The first folder contained recovered messages, hundreds of them. Some deleted within minutes of being sent, some archived and hidden. The tone wasn't subtle. Inside jokes, private nicknames, plans. The second folder contained voice memos, short recordings exchanged through a cloud app she must have assumed was private. I played one. Her voice sounded lighter than I'd heard in years. Then his voice followed. Confident. Familiar. The timestamp on one photo caught my attention. It was taken 12 minutes after I paid for our groceries that Saturday. Same store, different angle. They stood near the dressing room corridor. There was space between them, not touching exactly, but close. His hand hovered just at the edge of hers, and she looked at him with a version of her face I recognized from long ago, before kids, before mortgages, before routine settled in. I closed the laptop, not because I couldn't look at it, because I had seen enough. The next morning, I called a family law attorney. Her name was Diane Porter, mid-50s, precise, no theatrics. We met in her office downtown. The room smelled faintly of paper and lemon cleaner. She listened without interrupting while I laid out a timeline. When I finished, she folded her hands. "Do you want confrontation?" she asked. "Or protection?" "Protection," I said. She nodded once. We opened a file. The first step was financial. Diane recommended a quiet review of our joint accounts. I met with our financial advisor that same week, a small office overlooking the river, neutral furniture, no distractions. I asked him one question. If funds are being moved gradually, how early can we trace them? He adjusted his glasses and pulled up transaction histories. Depends on how clever someone thinks they are. Turns out, not very. Over the past 6 months, small transfers had been routed to a prepaid debit account under the name of a consulting LLC. The business registration matched the initials of the man in the messages. He wasn't just involved, he was financially entangled. I felt something then. Not rage, not heartbreak. Order. The kind you feel when pieces stop floating and start forming a pattern. That evening, Claire mentioned a weekend training seminar her company was sending her to. She spoke casually, rinsing a plate at the sink. "They're covering travel," she said. I nodded. I had already seen the corporate travel card charges. Hotel, dinner, 2 plane tickets, no training registration anywhere. I put my phone face down on the counter. Then I waited. Waiting wasn't passive. It was structured. Once the facts were clear, I stopped reacting internally and started organizing externally. Step 1 was financial containment. With Diane's guidance, I opened an individual account and redirected my direct deposits. Quietly, legally. I didn't drain anything. I didn't accuse her. I simply separated future income from shared access. Step 2 was asset protection. Years ago, when my father helped us co-sign the house, we had included a clause that required mutual authorization for refinancing or sale. At the time, it felt overly cautious. Now it felt useful. Diane filed the paperwork to freeze any unilateral changes to the deed. Step 3 was documentation. Every receipt, every transfer, every timestamp, organized chronologically, clean folders, clear labels, no emotion in the file names. Aaron compiled the digital evidence into a forensic summary. Not dramatic screenshots, not messy printouts, a structured report with metadata and recovery logs attached. Facts speak louder when they're arranged. At home, Claire moved through the week unaware of the shift beneath her feet. She packed for the training seminar on Friday afternoon, a small suitcase, navy blouse, the perfume I had given her last anniversary. She kissed the kids on the forehead before leaving, smiled at me in the driveway. "I'll be back Sunday," she said. "I know," I replied. I watched her drive away. Then I went inside and called Diane. "File," I said. By Monday morning, the separation petition was submitted. Temporary financial protections activated. Joint credit monitoring initiated. When Claire returned Sunday evening, she seemed relaxed, almost lighter. The kids ran to her. She hugged them tightly. For a moment, I watched that carefully. There's something complicated about seeing someone be a good parent while being a dishonest partner. After dinner, she mentioned meeting a potential investor for my construction expansion project. I had planted that idea earlier in the week. A contact downtown, I said casually. Wednesday afternoon, conference room, might be a good opportunity. She nodded. Want me there? Yes. She didn't hesitate. What she didn't know was that I had extended the same invitation to someone else. I reserved a small conference room at a co-working space downtown. Neutral decor, glass walls, clean table, no drama in the setting. 2 chairs across from mine, 1 envelope on the table. Wednesday arrived quietly. They came together, not holding hands, not touching, but close enough that the distance between them felt intentional rather than natural. He wore a fitted blazer, confident posture, the kind of man used to walking into rooms expecting control. Claire's face changed the moment she saw me sitting alone at the table. Not fear, calculation. He glanced at her, then at me. Marcus, he said slowly. I didn't realize. Sit, I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rush the moment. They sat. The room was quiet enough that I could hear the faint hum of the building's air system. Someone laughed in the hallway outside. Life continued normally beyond the glass. I slid the envelope forward. Inside were printed bank statements, transfer logs, travel receipts, the LLC registration under his initials, and a summarized digital recovery report. Claire didn't open it. He did. His jaw tightened slightly as he flipped through the pages. I can explain, Claire said, her voice softer than I'd heard in weeks. I'm not here for explanations, I replied. I'm here for clarity. He leaned forward. You don't get to ambush us like this. I looked at him steadily. You entered my marriage without permission. I'm simply closing the account. Silence followed. I've filed for separation, I continued. The house is protected. Financial review is underway. Corporate travel expenses are documented. Claire's hands trembled slightly on the table. You're overreacting, she whispered. No, I said calmly. I'm responding. Then I stood. There's nothing to argue. The paperwork will proceed. I left the envelope with them, and I walked out first. Outside, the air felt clear, not lighter, just defined. By the time I reached my car, my phone buzzed once, a text from my sister. Call me, I just booked a flight. Then I waited. My sister Laura doesn't ask many questions when something matters. She practices family law in Denver. 15 years in courtrooms. She understands leverage, timelines, and how quickly narratives can be shaped if you're not careful. When she landed Thursday evening, she didn't hug me first. She asked, "What has she told people?" I handed her a folder. Claire had already started sending messages to mutual friends, nothing explicit, just carefully worded lines about emotional distance, about growing apart, about stress. It was subtle. It positioned her as misunderstood rather than unfaithful. Laura read through the screenshots without expression. Good, she said finally. You moved first. That night, after the kids were asleep, Laura and I sat at the kitchen table with legal pads. The house felt quiet in a different way. Not tense. Focused. This stops being about betrayal, she said. It becomes about structure. She drew 3 columns: protection, evidence, exposure. Protection, she said, tapping the first column. Assets, custody, documentation. You've started that. She moved to the second. Evidence, you don't overshare it, you preserve it. Then the third. Exposure, controlled, only where policy or law requires it. I nodded. There was no need for raised voices, no need for speeches. The following morning, Diane filed additional motions, temporary custody parameters, restrictions on asset liquidation, notification clauses for large financial transfers, not punishment, stability. Claire came by the house that evening. She didn't have her key anymore. The electronic lock had been reset earlier that week under Diane's advice, legally permitted once separation was filed. She stood on the porch for several minutes before knocking. I watched from the security camera feed on my phone. When I opened the door, she looked smaller somehow, less composed. You changed the code, she said quietly. Yes. You're making this worse. No, I said. I'm making it clear. She asked to come inside. I allowed it. We sat at the dining table where we had eaten dinner as a family just days before. You sent documents to Mark's company, she said. I sent publicly verifiable information related to financial misuse, I replied. Her company was a private healthcare group. Their ethics clause was direct. Any employee involved in financial misconduct or reputational risk could be investigated. 2 of her weekend trips had been charged to a corporate travel card under the description of professional development. There had been no conference. She pressed her hands against her temples. You're trying to destroy me. I shook my head slightly. I'm separating myself from decisions you made. There's a difference. On Monday, she was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. That evening, she left a voicemail. 6 minutes long. It moved through phases. Blame, regret, justification, anger. I didn't return the call. Instead, I sat on the couch with my kids and watched a movie. Something simple. Popcorn in a bowl. Lights dimmed. They leaned against me, relaxed. The house felt steady. Laura stayed through Tuesday. Before leaving, she handed me one more folder. You should see this, she said. Inside were public records she had pulled on Mark, court filings from another state, a restraining order filed years earlier under a different city, allegations of coercion and financial manipulation. It had settled quietly. No headlines. But it existed. I read through the documents slowly. The pattern was familiar. I looked up at Laura. This changes things, I said. She nodded once. It changes how far this goes. That afternoon, I made a brief call to Claire's HR department. I didn't editorialize. I didn't speculate. I provided a public case number and left it at that. Then I put the phone face down, and I waited. The call from Claire's HR department happened faster than I expected. 48 hours after I shared the public case record, her administrative leave shifted to formal investigation. Not because of our marriage, not because of rumors. Because the man she involved herself with had a documented history that conflicted with their compliance standards. Healthcare organizations are careful about who is associated with their employees. Risk is measured quietly. Claire called from a number I didn't recognize. Please, she said before I even spoke. You've done enough. I leaned back in my chair. I haven't done anything beyond documenting facts. You knew this would ruin me. No, I said calmly. Your decisions did that. There was silence on the line. Then it ended. Later that evening, Mark finally reached out. One message, let's talk. I showed it to Diane. Don't engage emotionally, she said. If there's communication, it happens through counsel. So I didn't respond. Instead, I contacted a former client who now worked in private security and compliance consulting. I explained that there was potential financial entanglement involving a false LLC, shared transfers, and misrepresented corporate charges. Within days, a formal cease and desist was delivered to Mark regarding financial interference and misuse of funds tied to marital assets. It wasn't dramatic. It was procedural. After that, he went quiet. Claire requested to meet in person. We chose a public cafe downtown, neutral space, late afternoon, not crowded. She arrived early. No makeup, no jewelry, no wedding ring. When I walked in, she looked up and held my eyes for a moment that felt longer than usual. We sat across from each other. The smell of coffee hung lightly in the air. Plates clinked somewhere behind us. Ordinary sounds. I didn't think you'd find out, she said softly. Not because you're unaware, because you trust people. I didn't argue. Trust is not blindness. It's choice. She slid a photograph across the table. Our wedding day. We looked impossibly young, certain of things we didn't yet understand. You can throw it away, she said. I just didn't want to keep it alone. I studied it briefly. Not with nostalgia, just acknowledgement. I'm not here to punish you, I said evenly. I'm here to move forward. Tears formed, but she didn't raise her voice. Will you ever forgive me? I thought about that carefully. I've already accepted what happened, I replied. Forgiveness isn't the same as restoration. She nodded slowly. There was no shouting, no scene. Just two people sitting across from the outcome of choices that couldn't be undone. When we stood, she remained seated a few seconds longer. I walked out into the late afternoon light without looking back. That evening, Diane confirmed that the separation terms would proceed uncontested. Claire's employment status shifted from suspension to termination pending policy review. The financial transfers were documented as improper. Consequences didn't arrive like thunder. They arrived like paperwork, one document at a time. And by the end of the week, the structure of my life looked different. Not broken, reorganized. Then, on Friday morning, Diane called with one final update that settled the last open thread. And I listened carefully. Diane's voice was steady on the phone. "It's finished," she said. "Termination confirmed. Financial investigation closed. No criminal referral, but permanent notation on record." I stood in my office looking out at the parking lot below, workers moving equipment, trucks reversing slowly, ordinary motion. "And Mark?" I asked. "His LLC dissolved voluntarily this morning. Counsel advised him to step away from anything that looks like shared assets." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. There's a point in situations like this where the system stops reacting and starts settling. No more sharp turns, just gravity pulling everything into place. The formal separation agreement was signed the following Tuesday. Asset division reflected documented transfers. Custody was structured, not emotional. A schedule, clear exchanges, no ambiguity. Claire didn't contest it. When we met to sign, she looked tired but composed. Her attorney handled most of the talking. She didn't avoid my eyes, but she didn't hold them long either. After the papers were signed, she said quietly, "I never thought it would end like this. I considered that." "It didn't," I replied. "It ended when you made it temporary." She absorbed that without argument. The financial review showed exactly how much had been moved. Small amounts over time, enough to matter, not enough to destroy us. I covered the remainder, closed the joint accounts, opened new ones under my name, adjusted beneficiaries, updated passwords, changed insurance designations, systems reset. Mark never contacted me again. Through professional channels, I learned that the prior restraining order had resurfaced during Claire's employer review. Not my words, public records. The organization couldn't ignore that connection. Claire's termination letter cited policy violations related to misuse of corporate funds and failure to disclose reputational risk. No mention of me. Consequences are cleaner when they follow documented procedure. The hardest part wasn't the legal side, it was telling the kids. We didn't give them adult details, we gave them structure. "Mom and Dad are going to live in different houses," I said calmly at the kitchen table. "You'll still see both of us, you'll have schedules." They asked practical questions. Where will my soccer gear stay? Will the dog move? Can we still do movie nights? Children care about stability more than drama. We kept movie night, Friday evenings, same couch, same bowl of popcorn, just one less person in the room. The first weekend Claire took them to her new apartment, the house felt quiet in a different way. Not tense, not wounded, open. I walked through each room slowly, adjusted a picture frame, straightened a stack of mail, wiped down the kitchen counter. Routine grounds you. I made tea and sat at the dining table where this had all quietly begun months earlier. The surface looked the same, the chairs were the same, but the atmosphere was lighter, not because I had won, because there was nothing hidden anymore. Later that evening, I received one last message from Claire. "I'm sorry for how I handled everything. I know that doesn't fix it." I read it once, then I set the phone down. Some apologies are acknowledgments, not solutions. By the end of the month, the paperwork was finalized. The accounts balanced. The custody calendar shared digitally. Predictable. Life wasn't restored to what it had been. It was rebuilt into something clearer. And that clarity felt steady. But there was one more small moment that sealed it for me. And it happened on an ordinary Sunday morning. Then I waited. That Sunday morning started quietly. Sunlight came through the kitchen window at a low angle, catching the edge of the counter where the kids had left a cereal box open. The house was still, no rushing, no tension. I made coffee the way I always do. Measured, steady. I wiped down the table, stacked a few unopened mail envelopes into a neat pile, and opened the back door to let some fresh air in. The dog wandered outside. The neighborhood sounded normal. A lawnmower in the distance, a car door closing down the street, ordinary sounds. That's when I realized something simple. There was no second layer anymore. No quiet suspicion running under conversations. No background calculations. No wondering who was texting under the table. Just space. The kids came downstairs one at a time, hair messy, still half asleep. My son poured too much milk into his bowl. My daughter complained about math homework. We sat together without any emotional static in the room. That was the reset, not revenge, not vindication, just calm. Later that afternoon, I organized a small shelf in my home office. I placed the final legal binder in a drawer, labeled, closed. I don't look at it anymore. I don't need to. Claire and I now communicate through a shared parenting app. Messages are brief, direct, about schedules, pickups, school forms, boundaries are clean. A few weeks ago, a colleague pulled me aside after work. We were standing near the loading dock, watching a delivery truck back into place. He said quietly, "Can I ask you something personal?" I could see it in his posture before he said the words. "I think something's off at home." I didn't give him advice immediately. I told him one thing: don't react first, observe first. Sometimes clarity doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from patience and structure. That's what I learned. If this story felt steady to you, if it felt real, I'm glad you stayed with me. Go ahead and like the video if you appreciate calm, honest storytelling like this. Subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories told this way. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I always find it grounding to see how many different places connect over the same quiet moments. 2 other stories are waiting for you on screen next. Both are about people who thought they were losing everything and discovered they were actually rebuilding. Take care of your space, protect your peace. I'll see you in the next one.